Damned Legion, Legion of Damned. In this video, we're going to have a look at the Metal Legion of the Damned models released in 1998. I'm going to be painting some up for your pleasure, talk a bit about the model's history, and discuss the rules that supported them in 2nd and 3rd edition 40k. I'm Matthew, this is Miniscape, welcome. These minis and I go way back. Well, not these exact copies, since I lost mine around 2010. But before I lost them, they sat idle in a box for some 12 years, in their original box. I purchased them in 1998 because they were new and shiny, and I had been a good boy who deserved new and shiny things. Come to think of it, Mrs. Miniscape says I'm still good, so maybe I deserve having them again. I never got round to painting the original set I owned. You know what it's like with piles of shame. But thanks to my friend Tim, and some second-hand purchasing, I have managed to secure enough models to make a squad of 10 Legion of the Damned Space Marines, with a few more spare. I also want to thank Matt, Moj17, for supplying me with some models too, though I haven't managed to paint these yet, even though he gave them to me about a year ago. Yeah, I have a bit of a backlog, let's just say, but I'm grateful all the same. So let me show you some examples of the models that I have, and then how I built them. First one is this Marine with an exposed ribcage on his chest. Second is this one which looks a lot like one of the Death Company Space Marines, with the chains and the skull and crossbones on his chest. He's got flames on his knee pads, and some of these were partly assembled by their previous owners, so I've largely just left them as is. Notice the backpack has skulls where the vents would be, and flames in the middle. I was thinking one could convert a conventional backpack by cutting off the vents and replacing them with skulls from the Citadel Skulls kit. That's something I might try in the future. And this one is based on a very common sculpt which you might have seen many times before, which goes back as far as the Imperial Strike Force kit from the early 90s. And then we have the Flamer, which is one piece. He's got flames on his shoulder pads. How appropriate. And these are actually not separate from the rest of the miniature. Hot damn indeed. Here's this chap stepping forward, and he's got some bones sculpted over his thighs. And again, based on a sculpt that goes back to the early 90s, but with some extra detail added. Then probably my favourite of these, because I love beaky helmets, is this guy. No flames sculpted into the body, but there is a ribcage on the chest and some bones on his legs. These metal bolt guns also came with the Legion of the Damned sculpts, and you can see they've got extra skull bones and flames sculpted into the furniture of the weapon. There was also a metal bolt pistol sculpt, which had a skull above the muzzle. There's a few sculpted shoulder pads as well, such as this one with a large skull, and another like it, except it's got bones where the rim should be. And this is like the previous one, but without the skull in the middle. Another here with some bones lined up. And this one has flames. Here's what the heavy bolter looks like, shoulder mounted, with flames on the side, and a skeleton torso on top. There are a few kinds of backpacks. One that looks like the normal Space Marine plastic backpack but with skulls in place of the vents, and some flames in the middle section. Another like it, but their skulls are at a slightly different angle. And this time it's got bones going up the top of the backpack. And finally one more, but with skulls on the vents that seem to be protruding more than in the previous two sculpts. As usual, there's some flash to remove, which I do with my craft knife, and in some cases with a metal file. There's no real reason why I switch between these two tools other than to stave off the boredom. I suppose the knife helps me to get into more challenging areas. There's a couple of little wormies that need to come off the bottom of these backpacks. Well, they're not really wormies. This time they're more like stubbies. Before I superglue the Marines to the bases, I like to sand down the tops of the bases, specifically if they have been used before, to remove some gunk, but mainly to help the feet adhere to the base. A spot of glue is applied to the feet and tab before slotting it into the base. This model is the Sergeant, with more of a skull-looking helmet, and a bionic arm wielding a chainsword. Here you can see the tabs, say the year 1998. And who remembers the metal tabs that came on these sculpted metal shoulder pads? I use my hobby snips to clip these off. And then there's these knives that came on a sprue with backpacks and bolt guns. One of these will come in handy. I like how it's got a little parrot head on the end, but it will need decapitating before gluing onto this hand. In most cases, I drill holes in the arms and the arm sockets so I can put a little pin in there to make sure it's really secure. Now these are wormies that more than make up for the lack of them on the backpack earlier. Some of the tabs are so narrow that it leaves quite a gap on the slotter base. I fill this gap with milliput and then smooth it into place with the homemade sculpting tool. This also comes in useful when covering over the tab in the middle of the base. Before gluing the backpack onto the model, I score the surface with my craft knife, again to increase the surface area for the superglue to lock onto. But in plainer English, it makes the bond stronger and less likely to break. Using an old brush, I paint some PVA glue onto the base, and then I sprinkle on some sand. I prefer to sprinkle rather than dunk, because I don't want to overload the base with texture. And after leaving it to dry for an hour or so, I paint some watered down PVA glue over the top of the other sand, so that it'll dry rock hard. And that's the assembly part done. A very early mention of Legion of the Damned came in White Dwarf issue 99, released in March 1988. Midway through the magazine begins an article called Index Astartes, Legion of the Damned, with a hefty lore section and a beautiful drawing here of such a space marine festooned with flames and bones. The following page has some shoulder pad insignias by Dave Andrews and Colin Dixon. Berserker, born to die, and this skull with a fiery sneeze. Bless you, my son. Below that is a collection of miniatures painted as Legion of the Damned, and I will say, I think these models have been painted beautifully by Mike McVeigh and Dave Andrews, with skulls and flames free-handed onto the models. And isn't this just a doozy of a custom backpack banner? In fact, now I look at these, I think I want to paint my old Mark VI models in this way at some point. Following this is some rules to enable you to use Legion of the Damned models in Rogue Trader, including some flavour which I don't think has been mirrored in later rule sets. For example, their innate psychic abilities, such as Psychic Sense and Psychic Awareness, and Aura of Doom, which reduces the fighting skill and morale of enemy forces within 6 inches. As in later editions, the Legion of the Damned are immune to psychology and routing. Nothing too exotic so far. But hang on a moment. There was also a rule called Berserk Death Spasm. Every time a Marine model charged into hand-to-hand combat, a d6 was rolled, and on the score of a 6, their time had finally come. The Marine entered a Berserk Death Spasm, culminating in his automatic demise at the end of the hand-to-hand combat phase. But in the interim, a few effects applied. 1. The charge was doubled, and they didn't have to stick to squad coherency. 2. Their attacks were doubled, and their strength was increased to 8. 3. If a Marine ends the hand-to-hand combat phase having no foes remaining, presumably in base-to-base contact, the model may charge another enemy within 4 inches, and another round of combat is resolved immediately. 4. If the same situation occurs again, with no foes remaining, he may yet again engage another foe within 4 inches, and this process would continue, hacking, slashing, killing and charging, hacking, slashing, killing and charging, hacking, slashing, killing and charging, until there were no foes left within 4 inches, or until the Marine lost to combat, at which point his berserk spasm was over and he is removed as dead, and the normal turn sequence is resumed. Wow, talk about going out in a blaze of glory. And I like this section which discusses the points values, i.e. that no new points values have been assigned compared with other Space Marines, because fair points could not be decided upon, given all of their special powers. However, a few War Gear points modifications are given. I like this narrative focus, and I'm sure running them in Rogue Trader was a lot of fun. A few pages later is an advert for Space Marine miniatures, and it looks like Captains Romero and Newmar, and Brothers Harris and Meredith are representing the Legion here. And those came in at £2.50 for 3 in 1998. The second edition box set came with a leaflet showing you how to paint your models, and on the back page are a load of Space Marine chapters, including Legion of the Damned. Codex Ultramarines has a few pages dedicated to these Phantom Warriors. The colour section has the tactical squad painted up as Legion of the Damned. Bear in mind that this wasn't a dedicated kit for them, it was a standard kit painted with some exceptional freehand detail. The face on the sergeant here catches my fancy in particular. I like how a pretty ordinary face sculpt has been transformed into this apparition. Here they are ready to test some Khorne Berserkers, and I like this section at the top of the page which reads, "Nothing is known of the Legion's higher organisation, or if indeed it has any. Certainly no captains or apothecaries or the like are known for the Legion of the Damned." Later in the Codex, towards the end of the army list section, are some rules to use Legion of the Damned in your army for 2nd edition 40k. A single squad, costing 390 points, may be used with your Space Marine force, which comes from the squad's allowance. The usual rapid fire and break test rules apply, and the beginning of their entry is a lot like a tactical squad in terms of size, weapons, armour, and war gear. Like a tactical squad, they can have one heavy weapon and one special weapon. The sergeant can take assault weapons, and the entire squad can take crack grenades for 30 points. Their profile is better than a typical Space Marine, with an extra pip of weapon skill, ballistic skill, and initiative. Moreover, they have a few additional special rules. They ignore all leadership tests and can never break or be affected by psychology in any way, though they themselves cause fear. The squad can't be joined by other characters from your force and cannot benefit from rerolls or bonuses conferred by standards or being close to the army commander. So they fight with your force, but are otherwise not part of your force. So in 1994, one squad was all you got. But that changed in April 1996. White Dwarf issue 195, you know, the one where they're flexing the Thunderhawk gunship on the inside cover. In that issue, we get to see the handsome face of Jez Goodwin sculpting veteran Sergeant Centurius of the Legion of the Damned. And here it is painted by Neil Hodgson. Limited edition miniature at the time, and rarer than hen's teeth these days. There are rules for him to be used in the Legion of the Damned squad, but I will say no more about him now, because hopefully he'll get his own video at some point. In 1998, GW went full DAYUM with the Legion of the Damned. By White Dwarf 223, they got their own model line. As well as some lore, these pages show off the 10-man squad. The models, this time, have sculpted bones, flames and skulls on their armour, and in the case of the sergeant, some helmet modifications. And if these sculpts look familiar, it's because apart from the added flame and bone details, they are the same base model as the Space Marine tactical miniatures. Indeed, every Legion of the Damned model had its own vanilla analogue. White Dwarf 224 from August 1998 shows the Legion of the Damned sculpts you could buy. I remember at that time purchasing the Legion of the Damned box set for £20, which came with a sergeant, a flamer, a heavy weapon, and 7 regular Space Marines with bolters. I stupidly sold this some years ago, along with the box. I say sold. Apparently it got lost in the post, so I didn't even get my money for them. Anyway, life moves on. You could also get a Devastator squad for £25, but I think this was mail order only, along with the Assault squad, bikes, Landspeeder, an attack bike, which I never owned but I suspect were the vanilla kits with metal upgrade parts, which is fine, because the metal upgrades were awesome. I didn't realise until I looked through this magazine there were unique models for the melter and plasma gun marines as well, and there was a las cannon and missile launcher with the skulls and flames and all that. I've never seen these in the flesh, or metal I suppose, and this dreadnought, hot damn, a skeleton sprue for the icons and a chap to crucify, and you could pick your favourite weapons. If all this was on sale today, I would buy it all, and probably multiple copies of some things. Issue 224 also included a mini-codex for Legion of the Damned, written by Jervis Johnson. The rules here allow you to field a full army of Legion of the Damned rather than just a token squad. At most, 25% of your army could be characters, at least 50% must be squads, and up to 25% can be support. A tech marine must be taken if you want to take any vehicles or dreadnoughts, except bikes. Furthermore, no allies may be taken with your army. The same special rules exist as per the Ultramarines Codex, though there are a few additions. Apart from a few exceptions, your units can teleport into battle, which must be done in the first turn, and this bonus comes at no extra cost. Legion of the Damned plasma weapons behave like those carried by the forces of chaos, in that they are prone to overheating, something Imperial Space Marines didn't suffer in this edition. Their war gear list is pretty similar to that in Codex Ultramarines, and the units available won't surprise many experienced Space Marine players. With the exception of the Tech Marine, their characters are limited at 1 per army. Taking the commander is mandatory. It must be him who leads your army, and while I'm here, I want to point out that they show you how to convert this model from a chaplain. However, they give him a power sword which is not in the Legion war gear list. A typo, perhaps? Or is there an assumption that you can take war gear from the Ultramarines Codex too? Who knows? The characters here seem to be their maxed out version. For example, you may only take a level 4 librarian, not one of those rookie psychers. And compared to the Ultramarine versions, they exceed those characters in terms of stats. For example, weapon skill and ballistic skill are 8 rather than 7 for the vanilla Marines. The Legion of the Damned squads have improved stats compared to most of the Ultramarines as well, though their war gear options are pretty much the same. Most of the usual squads can be taken, but Terminators and Scouts are missing. The latter makes sense to me. They don't seem like the recruiting types. More like an old boys club of permanent alumni with no fresh meat. As for vehicles, they can take dreadnoughts, land speeders, rhinos, bikes, and attack bikes. Predators, land raiders, razorbacks, and support guns such as the Tarantula are not here. The land speeder is the Ultramarine version, rather than the Raven Wing type with assault cannon and heavy bolter. And for the icing on the cake, you can take Centurius at no additional cost. Now that is a hot damn moment. Rules for Legion of the Damned for 3rd edition 40k were found in White Dwarf issue 236 from September 1999. The rules were alongside a battle report between Eldar and a combined force of Legion of the Damned and Imperial Fists. There's still some flavour here. There are rules to convey how terrifying they are, with an additional -1 to leadership to any unit that loses an assault against them. The Legion themselves always pass morale checks and other leadership checks. Moreover, they must enter by deep strike, even when that rule is not included for a given mission. Unlike usual deep strike, they come in from turn 1 rather than starting from turn 2. Stats-wise, the Legionnaires are a little bit better than vanilla Space Marines, with an extra attack per model in general. The units they can take are a Commander, Command Squad with all the usual specialists, and a Legionnaire Squad, which is basically a tactical squad with an additional attack per model. I begin the painting phase by spraying the models black with Colourforge Matte Black Primer. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the base coat done. And dare I say, I find this terribly convenient. Time for some highlights. And my thinking this time for the highlighting is subtle and sharp. Like my wit. I wish. I use a 00 size brush loaded with a minimal amount of grey paint, which I mix up myself. but Fenrisian Grey would be suitable for this stage. As far as possible, I tried to use the flat edge of my brush to catch the edges, but in some cases it required the use of the tip. All of the obvious edges of the armour get this treatment, and so does the furniture of the bolt gun. On the right shoulder pad, with bones for rims, I paint a thin grey line with the tip of my brush where the bones meet the flat part of the problem, just for some emphasis. And that's what the model looks like after this first stage. Tan Earth by Vallejo is the next colour of choice, and this is the base coat that I use for all the bony sections. Be they skulls or bones. The ones on his shins are crossbones, for example, and of course, this goes on the skull vents as well, and the rims of the pauldron. And after all that bony work, he looks really cool, don't you think? Maybe we could call him Daddy Cool? No, probably not. I use Golden Yellow by Vallejo as the base coat for these flames on the backpack, on the bolt gun, or on the kneecap. These flames were clearly painted upside down in much of the artwork from the time, and by that I mean the orange was at the bottom rather than the top. But I like the look of it, and I'm totally going to propagate this error. And that's how it looks at this stage. In the past, I have base coated with dark sand before applying yellow, but this particular shade of yellow can go straight over the top of black, and it's pretty opaque if applied in a couple of thin coats. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. It's dark sand time. This is painted over all the areas that were painted tan earth before, leaving some of the tan earth showing in the recesses as a shade. The brush I'm using here is actually a synthetic brush which I got in a 3-pack with 2 others from my local craft store. They cost about £2.50. I know, the lifespan of these isn't going to be very long, but they're still usable so far. And there's a little bit of a curl on the tip, but I can still manage. I'm not sure I'll switch to synthetic entirely, but it was a relatively cheap experiment nonetheless. With the skulls, there's a dimple above each eye socket. I don't paint that with dark sand though, and I take my time to leave a line of dark sand showing just above the eye sockets. While I'm waiting for them dry bones, I go for Flickering Flame by Warpaint's Fanatic, water it down some, and then paint it on the bottom third of the flames, in an attempt to build up a sort of yellow to orange gradient. Then I go for orange-red, and paint it on the very bottom of the flames. Off camera, I go back and forth with these 3 colours until I'm happy with the gradient on the flame sculpts. I paint the eye lenses with corn red, but I'll come back to those later. Flat brown next, which goes on the pistol holster. This chap was giving me vibes that he prefers this shade of leather. A phantom he may be, but I found him with taste nonetheless. He's also got one of these little belt pouches, and that gets the brown colour as well. Vallejo white next, which is used to make the bones pop, just painting it at the edges, at the tips of the bones, and around the eye sockets on the skulls. And that's how it looks at this stage. Mithril silver next, although I took the advice of many of you and bought some Vallejo Air aluminium, and I have to say, it's a smashing paint, so thanks for that. I mix this with some black, and paint all of the metallic areas on the bolt gun, the muzzle, the magazine, the iron sights, and on the grip. When that's dry, I highlight all of these areas with mithril silver neat. Vermin brown next, or scrag brown in new money. I paint thin lines of this on the edge of the leather areas, to highlight it, but also to make it look like it's cracked leather through wear and tear. I use a little orange on the bottom of the lens, the eye lens on his helmet. And then I mix orange red with vermin brown to paint another highlight onto the cracked leather. And here you can see I have put a little dot of white in the top corner of the eye lens to make it pop. AK grass green is the main colour I use for the base. That is, the top of the base and the rim, which takes a few thin coats. Some flickering flame is dry brushed across the texture, followed by another dry brush of, you guessed it, dark sand. And there we have it. Not 10, but a small group of Legion of the Damned models. A bodyguard for a character maybe, but in time they will surely be 10 strong. I just need to find the time to finish painting them. I do love these models. I feel like they don't take themselves seriously, and that resonates with me. Bold and contrasting, they make quite the spectacle, which this white dwarf image surely expounds. It makes me want to make a little collection of these myself. I reckon I could make a striking dreadnought, for example. And I have enough spare parts to throw something together, eventually. As I have already said, a kind chap called Matt sorted me out with some more, and I've managed to secure the bits to convert the commander. I've already made a start on this. So if a chunk of you like Legion of the Damned, I'll make him into a video too. And I reckon I'll be able to get these on the tabletop soon, and take some pictures for your pleasure. Watch this space. I guess the main spare parts I'm looking out for to add to my collection are the official Legion of the Damned missile launcher and las cannon parts. Legion of the Dan? Who is Dan? And what is his Legion? Anyway, I'd love to add these parts to some of my existing models so that I can expand my Legion of the Damned collection. But of course they'll be expensive and rare, so we'll see what happens. I feel like this project is a pleasing reversal of what was for me a bit of a hobby tragedy. Tragedy is possibly too big a word, but I was indignant and now I am not. That's a win for sure. Big thanks to Tim for being my constant source of old models, and also thanks to Richard from Brigham Battle Wargaming for the necessary images. By the way, I also have an Instagram page, if that's your shtick, so why not have a look? And with that, I better go paint some more minis. Take care, and thanks for watching.
L-E-G-I-O-N Legion D-A-M-N-E-D Damn Ned.
No, it's Damn Med, not Damn Ned. What's Ned done so wrong he has to be slighted this way? Damn Med. I know it's not a two-syllable word, but the song needs it, you know? Right? You've gone. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, to be honest. Serves me right for being such a boring person kind of thing.